So we are live in 5 seconds.
Okay.
All right. So I'm with my special guest, Jake Parker, creator of Missile Mouse, Skyheart, Antler Boy, and Little Bot and Sparrow.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a creator of graphic novels and children's stories, and he has an education site called SVS Learn. And it's also a YouTube channel where he hosts a podcast weekly on Tuesdays with Will Cherry, Lee White, and of course himself, and sometimes Elisa Cotterill and Anthony Wheeler.
Yep, Samantha.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
So, and my interview series is called Off the Spinner Rack because I've been interviewing other comic artists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually start with like your earliest years, like what got you started drawing, what were you drawing the most of, and what comics inspired you to become a comic creator.
Oh, that's a great question. So I very early on, I got into like Batman and Superman and like the Super Friends. And there was a show, they were playing the reruns of Adam West's like original 1960s Batman show. I love that show so much. And so I'd watch it, and I had my mom like make me a Batman costume, and I had little Batman action figures, and I was drawing Batman and stuff. And then that was like really young, and I've always been like a drawer. That's how I expressed myself, and how I got interested in things was visually, and but it was like a mix between that, and I also loved like Garfield and um the newspaper comic strips. So you could find like, if you go through, I don't know, my box of old drawings, you'll find like little drawings of Batman and Superman and Aquaman and Wonder Woman, and they all have like the big Garfield eyes, like the giant. They look like John, but as a superhero, right, with muscles.
Funny.
And then I got into Star Wars and sci-fi and like the other sort of Marvel sci-fi ish comics, which were like the X-Men and Wolverine and stuff like that. And there was always like this sci-fi element to the stuff that they were doing. And then that led me down the road um to like the Image comics and some manga like Battle Angel Alita and Appleseed and stuff like that. And so I was really, as I was going into my teen years, just expanding, into all this other stuff that was so cool, so visually like striking. But I still had this like this spot in my heart for like Calvin and Hobbes, right?
Yeah.
And so if you look at my style, it's like this mix between like the cartooniness of Calvin and Hobbes with the really tied down realistic mechanics of like Akira or something like that. And so that's what I was drawing. Like in high school, I did a lot of superhero stuff as well, with mixed in with sci-fi, but I did come up with a character when I was in ninth grade that was a mix between the Rocketeer, the Rescue Rangers, and a little bit of like James Bond. And I made this character called Missile Mouse, and I set him in a Star Wars style universe, right? Or maybe it's more like a Star Trek. It's like a cleaner Star Wars, right? And so I would draw this Missile Mouse character over and over and over again. And eventually in my 20s, I did an actual Missile Mouse like comic that was, it was like 25 pages or 24 pages, something like that. I got it printed at Kinko's, and I took it to San Diego Comic-Con to show my favorite artists. And one of them in particular was Jeff Smith, who drew Bone. And I was a huge fan of Bone as well, because Bone's like that mix. It's like, what if you took Lord of the Rings, but you did it cartoony? You know, you did Pogo in a Lord. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. So Jeff Smith was like, "Holy cow! Look at this. This is amazing. Wow, you're really good at this." And that just made my day. Like I'm still riding off that high, and this was like 2002. You know,
Oh,
22 years later.
yeah.
Um, and then I would say my style since then and my influences since then have just gotten a little more varied and a little bit more dialed in.
Mhm.
So I think you could still see a lot of that in what I do now.
Yeah. The last comic artist I interviewed had a style that's kind of similar in like the elements that he does, because he does like fantasy sci-fi type stuff. Um, and when I mentioned you to him, he actually knew who you were because he worked on Flight with you, Paul Ravoche.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's cool. Wow. Yeah, small world.
Yeah, but you guys have a similar aesthetic to your work with
Mhm.
having the mechanics and a little bit of
Yeah.
sci-fi
A lot
fantasy and
of
stuff.
the Flight artists kind of had that. We were all, I think, drinking from the same well, you know, the same
Yeah,
well water. Like we love Miyazaki and we love we're all about the same age, so we had a lot of the same influences growing up and stuff, and everybody has a little bit of a, goes in a little bit different direction. But I think that's why those stories, even though they weren't necessarily all about flying,
mhm,
there was this cohesiveness to the anthology. I think it's because we all were coming from you know, similar creative backgrounds, probably.
yeah. So that was a pretty cool little instance.
Yeah.
And one of my other questions was, when you were young, what was your aspiration and how's that changed since you've become an adult?
When I was young, I wanted to do newspaper comics, and then I discovered, well, before newspaper comics, I wanted to be a car designer. I wanted to
I,
like design sports cars. I always thought that would be cool. And I it was like a good year and a half there where I was always drawing like cool sports cars. And then and then I just got way into comics and I was like, oh, comics would be cool. I want to do that. But what changed was in my early 20s, I got a job kind of randomly in animation. Um, there's a studio called Fox Animation. 20th Century Fox had opened up an animation studio in Phoenix, and and I lived in the Phoenix area. I was in the suburb outside of Phoenix, and my old high school art teacher, who I was visiting and like staying in touch with, he's like, "Hey, your stuff's." I was showing him my artwork that I made since high school, and I think 21 at the time. He's like, "That stuff is really good, Jake. You should go apply at this animation studio." And long story short, I got that job, and then ended up working in animation for about 12 years. So that was not expected, but I always had this appreciation for animation, obviously, and it was a cool job. I loved it, but ultimately, like comics, sort of won out. So that's what I
yeah.
do a lot more now.
So, what animation did you end up working on?
That one. So you've heard of Anastasia, right?
Yep.
Okay, so Anastasia was that studio's like breakout hit, and they're like, "All right, let's do our next movie." And they started hiring on more people, and I was one of these new hires, and it was for a movie called Titan AE.
Yep. I remember
Yeah,
that one. It
yeah,
was a cool
which
movie.
cool movie, but its budget was like 70 million and its box office was like 7 million.
Mhm.
So what happens to your animation studio when your box op and your opening weekend for your movie is $7 million against a $7 million budget? You
Uh,
send the president of Fox Animation out to the studio to lay everybody off.
yeah.
And that's what happened. Chris Meldandri, he was the president of Fox at that time, and he came out and was just like, listen, guys, we can't afford to keep the studio open, and we're just going to have to send you all, on your way. They gave us good severance packages. They allowed us to stay at the studio to kind of hone our portfolios and to try out for DreamWorks was like looking for more artists at that time. And so a bunch of people tried out for DreamWorks and I did an animation test for DreamWorks, didn't get the job. But what's funny is Chris Meldandri was such a smart and forward-thinking CEO. And I mean, his track record, you can't deny it. Like he saw what the future was at that time and knew that the 2D animation stuff that Don Bluth was doing just wasn't going to sell. And so he closed down the studio, put everything into Blue Sky Studios back in New York. And Blue Sky Studios eventually, would put out the Ice Age movies. And let's see, about 3 or 4 years later, I ended up working at Blue Sky Studios and worked on Horton Hears a Who, Ice Age 3, Rio, and Epic. And then Chris Meldandri would leave Fox and start his own animation company, which is Illumination Entertainment. And they launched that with Despicable Me. And now that's a complete, masterful like success story of how to start an animation studio and sort of take over the world with your creations. So so that was my like history in animation, and my two run-ins with Chris Meldandri at Fox Animation. And then
Oh, you froze. Or is that me?
Sorry, say it again.
You froze for a second.
Oh, looks like we both froze because I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
What'd you mean? Where'd I cut off at?
You said Fox Animation right when you froze after. I'm forgetting the words before.
Well, the point I was making was, those were my two run-ins with Chris Meldandri. Was once getting laid off at Fox Animation, in Phoenix, and then having him come to the studio and at Blue Sky Studios and essentially pat us on the back and congratulate us on, Horton Hears a Who and the stuff we were doing there.
And then skipping ahead a little bit of some of my questions, your comic Skyheart.
Mm-hmm.
What was the inspiration behind that, and will you revisit that world in the future?
Yes. Short answer is yes, I will revisit it someday. The problem is I have like, I'm like a serial comic starter and not a serial finisher. So I feel like I need to finish. Yeah, you feel the same way? You do the same thing?
Like 6 stories, got to figure out how to get them out.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this idea I've been thinking about, mulling over. It's called project debt, and every time you start a project and you don't finish it, you incur more project debt. And the way to pay off your project debt is to finish the project, call it done, and put it out in the world. And, you could kind of, in some ways, declare project bankruptcy and just say everything that I'm in debt with now, I'm just dropping it, forgetting it. We're not going to worry about that anymore. And I'm starting fresh and moving forward. But I don't believe in that. Maybe that is a good solution, but I kind of feel like the real true way to get out of project debt is take a page from, like, I don't know if you've heard of Dave Ramsey, but he gives like online advice on how to get out of financial debt. And he calls it the debt snowball. And I feel like there's a creative debt snowball. And that is, you start with the project that's going to be the easiest to finish. Let's say it's a comic you started that's like 50 pages long and you got halfway through it. So you just have 25 pages left. Start with that one first, finish it. You're going to feel excited and happy that you like got this thing done, and you actually, it's not weighing over your head anymore. And that excitement and energy is going to like get you energized to do the next biggest debt project. Maybe the next one is like this project that you want to do that's 100 pages. So you're going to go do that. And then I think you just work your way through until it's all done. And you tell yourself, I'm going to give myself 3 years. And in 3 years, I'm going to be out of project debt. And then I can, move forward and be very responsible with the projects that I start, and only start things that I'm going to finish. That's something I'm thinking about right now. But back to Skyheart, it's like, I did the first half of the story, left it on a cliffhanger, and then I just got like pulled away into other directions, and um, and I feel like I'm a better storyteller now, and I can see all the problems with the first book. And my question is like, do I go back and fix those things before I make the new one? But I think what it's going to take is me just having I think me finishing a couple of these other projects, then finishing that one and calling it good. The inspiration for Skyheart, to go to beginning of your question, was I grew up in Arizona. I lived in Arizona I live there now, but I lived there until my early 20s. And I remember driving through the desert and looking at these big, massive, like rock formations, these huge rocks like jutting out of the ground. It's so cool to see those things in person. And I was like, oh, how cool would it be if like those things, if all the desert floor around us was actually just sky, and those rocks were like floating through the skies if they were clouds, because there were these big clouds and then the rocks. I'm like, why, what if the rocks were floating like that? Now I know it's not totally unique and original idea, and since then we've seen it like executed so well, like Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, with like the Hallelujah Mountains, right? I love it. But for me, I was like, well, what if that's the location? Like what would have to happen for the world to be that way, and that the continents are floating? And so I designed this world, and then I was like, well, if this is the world, what caused it to be this way? Surely it didn't start out this way. So then I'm getting into the lore and the backstory of everything, and then I'm like, okay, let's fit characters into this world, and that's where the idea for Wake came, and for Yana, the bird princess, and for Malthrek, the bad guy, and Grimm and Limbert and or Limburg, and all the different characters in this. It was just like, once you start with one character, you got to do like a character that offsets them in a certain way, and then another character that balances that character out, and that's really how I built the story. I've got other, Skyheart was like written and drawn around 2018, I think. So we're like 6 years out from that, and in 6 years, you know, you could learn a lot about story, and you could learn a lot about yourself as a creator and as a person. And it's hard to go back and look at that stuff and feel like it holds up or not. So I don't know, there's just ways that I would do it a little bit different now if I were doing it over.
Yeah, I understand that, because like this is one of the characters that I made in high school, and he's kind of followed me throughout the years, and I've been wanting to build the story, but I'm like, I need to build my skills up first to tackle it, but then it keeps knocking at the door, like, let me out.
Yeah. Please. What is it like? I'm trying to see, you're small on my screen, but is it like
Oh, here, let me
a mermaid character, or
he's
I can just see the top half. Oh, he's like is that a tail coming out the back?
yeah, so basically he's a blue dwarf light spirit. So it's a dark fantasy that I plan on doing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so yeah, he's followed me through since high school, 2010, 2011-ish. Just been building out the world and stuff.
Do you find it's weird how your characters actually become, I don't know if this is like a psychological mental problem creators have or writers have, but they actually exist, right? In your
Yeah.
mind for real. And
Yeah.
you can have conversations with them and you can ask them, what do you want? What do you want to do? What are you going to do in this situation? And they'll reply in their own voice.
Mhm.
And it's hard to like, that's why you like hang on to them, even though you came up in high school, you know, and that was 10, 15 years ago or whatever. It's hard to like put them away and forget about them. I feel that way with Missile Mouse. Like
Uh,
I could just hear his voice in my head.
this is another comic artist that I interviewed, Fabrizio Aiello.
Mhm.
Uh, he says, "Hey, I've been listening to Three Point Perspective for a long time now. Great
Right
podcast."
on. Awesome.
And
Thank you.
he's has
Cool.
the comic Horace H. Hoover, which is a occult detective that has a vacuum cleaner for a head. It's a good book.
See, okay. Can I say something about that? About that and your character and my Missile Mouse character. The reason I love comics so much is, and the beautiful thing about comics is comics is a place where you can really take chances and do stuff that nobody in their right mind would like make into a TV show or a movie. You know, like eventually the cream rises to the top and a lot of money gets spent to it. But a lot of times there's stuff out there that's like so safe they
Yeah,
can't, you know, in film and TV, it has to be a money back guarantee type of situation. And in comics, you know, it's just you and a pen or a tablet and your story ideas, and you could put whatever you want out there and see what works, you know?
yeah. I didn't ask. What Image comic did you like?
Oh, Image Comics, Wildcats was like my favorite one. But then I was really into like I loved Eric Larson's Spider-Man, and when he started doing Savage Dragon, I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun. This is cool." But then he came up with a character called Super Patriot that Dave Johnson ended up doing a miniseries, 2 miniseries for, and that just blew me away. The art style, the technical drawing ability. So for those early '90s Image Comics, it was like Wildcats first, Super Patriot second, Spawn third, probably. And you know, I got into Youngblood a little bit, um, Kindred, Team Six, I think it's called. I'm trying to remember all of them, but
There,
the
there's also the Max.
yeah, the Max. I read the Max too. I love Travis Charest when he took over for Wildcats. That was like a big deal for me too. I really loved his style.
And then I have one question that is a co-question from Paul Ravoge. He was wondering how you see all ages books intersecting with crowdfunding,
Mm.
all ages comics.
Um, yeah, I think the inherent problem with crowdfunding is, and you'll notice this on Kickstarter, is there's like so many NSFW comics on Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
And I think the inherent problem there is the people on Kickstarter are like 20 to 40,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to Kickstarter for um to, basically to satisfy their own needs and not to like shop for their kid or to shop for their you know, they're not shopping for other people, they're shopping for themselves essentially. And you know, and there's a percentage of Kickstarters that don't ever like fulfill, right? So
Yeah.
everybody knows there's a little bit of risk involved. And so it's just not a good platform for like kids to kids to shop on. And all ages I get, it's like it's I love all ages books. Like Bone, perfect all ages book. You can hand it
Mhm.
to a kid, and my son's gonna enjoy reading it just as much as I do. But unfortunately, like because an all ages book can be for everyone. It can also kind of be for no one sometimes, right? So, and what seems to work obviously is like the Scholastic Book Fair, because they put a bookstore where the kids are actually going to be. They don't have to ask them their mom to like drive them to the bookstore. They don't they're they don't have to do anything other. They actually, it's a treat because they get out of class to go to the thing. So if there's a way to have to like mix, it'd be so cool to mix crowdfunding with a Scholastic Book Fair. Like, what if there was, now I'm just coming up with this great question, because now you got my brain like firing. Like, what if there was a way, and kids do have like a short attention span. You tell them a book's going to be available a year from now, they're like, my life's over. I don't even know if I'm going to be around a year from now, right? That's so far away. But it would be cool if there's like a place for them to like see samples of future books, and they had voting rights. Maybe they had 10 credits, and you could put all 10 in one book, or you could put 1 in 10 different books. And maybe those credits are like donated funds, like donate to the kids, all ages kids book fund or something. Excuse me. But then a year later, those books could be like available to the kids at the next book fair or something like that. And that might be a way for like kids to be very involved in future book projects. I don't know.
But waiting a year does teach them lessons in patience.
It does. And you know what? I should give kids more credit than what I've given them. Like, you think about Harry Potter and how it changed the whole entire landscape. Like, literally, I remember before Harry Potter, the scene, what it was like, and I remember afterwards. And kids were like, absolutely could wait for the second book and not lose interest. And it's the same now with Dogman. It's the same with like Wings of Fire and like Amulet. I know the last Amulet book
for Wings of Fire, right?
What's that?
You just did a book for a graphic novel for Wings of
The
Fire.
cat's out of the bag on that. There was a leak, and I just finished doing some work for that. I'm excited for that book to come out. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, those kids, they can wait, and it's cool now. Like, Miss Mouse came out in 2010. Second one came out in 2011, and there's legitimate adults, like actual adults who are like 25 who are like, I read it as a kid. I totally love that book. It's amazing. And that just blows me away that like I'm that old, but also that it still has that impact on people this many years later.
And that reminds me, your other character that you made, Skull Chaser, weren't you working on getting a comic out on that one? Or
yeah. So that's one of those projects that I want to like really wrap up before I go back to Skyheart. But maybe I'll do Skyheart first and give that one a rest. Who knows? But Skull Chaser, it's on the back burner right now. Because honestly, I'm still trying to figure out that character as well. Like, what is his story? Is he a background character or a side character? Is he like the Boba Fett, or is he the Luke Skywalker, right? And so I think I want to return to that world. Of course, I'd love to do a third Missile Mouse book, and I've got an idea for a third Missile Mouse book, and I've got like a handful of ideas actually. So if I return to that world, I think what I would do is have Skull Chaser be like a secondary character, or a person they run into, or if anything, a Han Solo to a Luke Skywalker character that we could, really follow.
Then that leads me to one of my other questions. I know you're into Star Wars, you're a big fan of it.
Mhm.
Did you ever get into any of the other sci-fi series, like Star Trek or Farscape or any of those?
I a little bit of Star Trek. I mean, not I haven't seen every episode. If I have a favorite Trek, it's definitely the Next Generation. You know,
Mhm.
that's I watched that as a kid, and I still like to catch a few episodes as an adult. I thought J.J. Abrams' reboot was pretty darn solid. I just recently watched that again, like a few months ago, and I was like, "Dang, this is a good movie." Like, this is it. It honestly, his Star Trek movie is way better than his Star Wars movie
Mhm.
as a movie. You know, I wish he would have brought that kind of brain power to Star Wars that he did to Star Trek, because I feel like honestly though his hands were probably really tied on Star Wars, and they're like, don't mess anything up, and so he just did a exact like not a parody but like a replica of A New Hope. We're not going to talk about episode 9. um
Oh,
Firefly was a cool show.
oh yeah,
You know,
that was a
if
fun
there's
one.
another or not Star Trek, but another sci-fi I'm into, it'd be Firefly.
Mhm.
And then if the thing that I'm maybe the second biggest fan of, Star Wars first, then it's the Avatar movies. I'm dying for the third one to come out. I think it's this year. Is it this year or is it
I'm
next
not
year?
sure because movies from that era, I liked District 9 more than,
Yeah, yeah.
but
I'm looking it up. Avatar 3 is Fire and Ash. Is going to come out, yeah, in December.
okay.
Sweet. Oh, and that
And
means
then
we're gonna get a trailer like in the next few months
there's,
or a teaser.
um, and then I know you also work on children's books and illustrations.
Mhm.
So going from one project to the next, like from they all require different ways of thinking. How do you get yourself uh, ready for those projects?
The children's book is you, you what's cool about a children's book is trying to distill a lot of information into one single image, whereas in a comic you can you could break all that information down to like 5 panels, 6 panels on a page. So that's a challenge I love, and really one of my favorite things to do in a children's book is to hide as much, or not hide, but like to just fill each page with as much cool, interesting stuff to look at, because um, the pages are so big, and I want the kids to really like not just cruise through it so fast, but like stop and be like, oh, what's that? What's this? And one of my favorite books that I've done is The 12 Sleighs of Christmas, which is about Santa's sleigh getting trashed. And so the elves have a contest to make a new sleigh for him. And they break into 12 different groups. And so they come up with like the hot rod sleigh and like the semi truck sleigh and the bulldozer sleigh and the crab walker mech sleigh and all that stuff. And that was a lot of fun to do because I could just pack each page with cool detail and little interesting stuff.
And then, so you have the wider page that you can fit a lot of stuff into, and illustration is kind of the same where you're making a story in a single
Yeah,
image.
illustration. Yeah, that's sort of the same thing too. I mean, typically with just a straight up, I don't do much illustration work if it's either children's books or graphic novels. And then if it's an actual single image on its own, that's usually just me coming up with something I want to do. So if you go to my website, every single illustration isn't tied to a client or anything. It's just me messing around creating something. And so usually in that case, I'm just I'm trying to make something striking might be good on a wall, maybe not, but everything that I do, that I touch, that I work on, has to have. I want you looking at it to think, what's the story behind this? Like you look at that, like, where are these characters? What is the place they're at? What are they like defending themselves against? Or, you know, why does he have that sword with a jewel in it? Like, what's the story behind that? Love adding little details and everything. That one's another good one. Where it's like, let's hide as many of these little bunny creatures in it as possible,
Yeah.
and make sure you don't see them at first, but that you spend some time in there and look at it.
And
So,
just so you know, it is 3:34. I know you said you had
oh yeah,
30
okay.
minutes.
You want to do one more question? We'll call it good.
Yeah, let me look through. Now.
This has been nice, by the way. I'm
Thanks.
sorry I missed our time earlier. I feel horrible about that.
Well, you didn't. You had said 3, so.
Yeah.
Uh, oh yeah. You kind of answered that one about what your oldest character was.
Hmm.
Oh, in your workflow, is there any part in it that you need absolute focus, or are you a
Hmm.
person that can multitask?
No, I am. Here's how it goes. The ideation phase, the time where I'm like coming up with the initial idea, especially in comics, so like the layout phase, it's probably the least technical. You could look at the drawings that I do for layouts, and they are the goofiest, ugliest things. It's like a ball for a head, and like
Mm-hmm.
just the faintest um, uh, expression on their face, right? Like just the eyebrows and 2 dots. But it takes me like an hour to do a layout for a page, and so I'm like drawing, or a half hour or something like that. I'm drawing, I'm erasing, I'm rearranging, I'm putting things back and forth, and then finally, everything reads smoothly. And for that particular phase, it's all hands on deck, like total focus. Sometimes no music, just silence. And then everything outside of that typically is podcasts or books on tape.
Yeah, layouts.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know it.
Also,
So,
really.
yep. So that's what I do. I'll listen to a book while I'm inking or while I'm penciling, or I'll listen to YouTube videos or live streams like this or whatever, and then we're good. We're good to go.
Yep. Sounds like we're good to go. And then one last thing before we head out, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
plug this artist because I think this would be right up your alley.
Okay.
This sci-fi book. Let me go ahead and do this.
Whoa. What is
Yeah.
this?
This is Aaron Lopresti's book, Kit Car Planet Doom.
Galactic Ranger.
It's a comedy sci-fi.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah. I think if for SBS, he'd be a good one to interview.
Okay.
Same with
Cool.
Fabrizio.
Thanks for the recommendation. It's
You're
awesome.
welcome. And thank you for coming on my show.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'll finish up your thank you gift.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I love the drawing that you sent, the photo. It's looking good.
Thanks.
Really nice deep cut there with the 2 designs. So I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I was looking through it and I saw the initial design you had. I think it was like 2019 or it was when you were 19.
Yeah.
And it looked
Yep.
really cool. But it kind of looks like maybe a rocket rat.
Yeah.
maybe a
Yep.
sidekick.
Yep. That was when I was deep into like Appleseed and
And
Ghost of the Shell. And I was like, let's make Missile Mouse as like hardcore cool as possible.
you mentioned on like the Instagram post Usagi Jimbo.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
another big, the good all ages comic too. Uh, yeah, I sometimes I forget what an impact Usagi has been on my art as well. But yeah, that's such a good book.
So it was
Cool.
nice chat with you, and thank
Yeah,
you for coming
April,
on the
this is
show.
good. Thank you for having me. You're a good interviewer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And if you ever want to come back, you're always welcome. I do
Okay.
a lot draw streams once in a while too. So if you ever want to hang out and draw,
All right. Thanks for the open invitation. I appreciate it. And sorry I got to bounce, but catch you later.
take care.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day. God
You
bless.
do too. I got to figure out the button to push to leave. Where do I go? Oh, there it is.